Welcome to Fighting on Film, the War Movie Podcast. In this new weekly series, we'll be bringing you our review of Masters of the Air as each new episode drops.
Hello, welcome back to Fighting on Film. Don't forget you can catch up on our series on Masters of the Air so far by visiting fightingonfilm.com, and also don't forget to use 10% off at airfix.com by using the code FOFPodcast, that's all caps, all one word, FOFPodcast, to get 10% off at Airfix. And please do use it because it's only going to be available for another couple of weeks while the show is getting towards the end. So this week's going to be a double episode because we missed last week's episode 7. We were both busy. So we're going to do 7 and 8. I'm going to cover 7. Matt's going to cover 8. And we're only a week away from the end of the series. Where's the time
We
gone?
are approaching the end.
I know. Yeah.
Fast approaching.
What's going to happen
Amazing,
to
really.
all of our 100th Bond Group buddies that we've grown to love over 9 weeks? I mean, we already know, which is a bit... It's a bit counterproductive, but where's it going to go? So, episode 7, I think I'll just jump straight in, Matt, shall I?
Go for it.
Lovely. So we open at Stalag Luft 3, been narrated by Crosby, and then we're into the Stalag. You've got Eagan, Crank, Buck, a lot of guys who were on their bomber group in their forts are in the Stalag with them. So some of the things I don't know about you, Matt, but some of the turret gunners never got called by their names, so I find it hard to know who they are.
It's a little bit tricky to
Yeah,
associate them directly sometimes.
yeah, exactly. So it shows sort of the hardships of the camp. They're not eating well. The Red Cross are having issue getting their mail in. Food's scarce, but they get some food from the German the internment guards, not much. And they find and kill a cat to eat, showing how bleak things are. One guy said, keep it down. It's the only protein we're going to get for a while. It's kind of dire straits, but, things aren't awful, but they're not fantastic for our gang in the camp. So they're listening to the news on a homemade radio. There's some mentions of Monte Cassino. There's mentions of Anzio. I think we're in early 1944. At this point.
Yeah, March.
That's nice. I like that little radio segment. It really helps contextualize the war outside of the group because we don't really get much of that. It's like Band of Brothers, like the Pacific. You're only learning about what's going on in your own little theatre. So to have that little bit of a context was nice.
It's that seeing the war through their eyes only, isn't it, sort of thing?
Of course, which is absolutely fine. Then we get a roll call. A roll call's called. The huts are searched by the prison guard, and Eagan and Buck's radio is found under the table. And Buck makes a comment of saying, well, they didn't get the headphones. And Eagan says, oh, well, that's something I guess. So it's a bit touch and go in the old camp. So then we're back to Thorpe Abbotts. And we get replacement crewmen arrive in early 1944. Cros narrates it, saying that some of the crewmen didn't want to get to know the new guys because they'd lost so many friends. One of the crew makes an offhand remark saying they're just kids, man. And then Rosie introduces the new boy, and we learn that we learn that Quinn and Bailey have made it back, and they get to go home. And then we have a scene in the mess, and I kind of feel like the mess is really subdued at this point. It's not as raucous, and even though there's piano music and people are having drinks, it doesn't feel as... So I'm trying to find the word to describe it, and I couldn't get it in my notes properly, but it just didn't feel as vibrant as earlier episodes because we've lost so many people. Rosie and Cros are the only two principal cast that we really know in there, and then Rosie and Cros are talking about getting 25 missions. You've got to show these new guys that someone can do it. And Rosie's on 24. And then this episode really does switch back and forth between the camp and Thorpe Abbotts really chop and change, so I'm going to be doing that as I talk. And then we have Buck and Eagan back in the Stalag. They talk about making a crystal radio. Then there's a raid at the camp, and they surmise they're hitting Berlin. The war's ramping up. The Allied air forces are hitting Berlin in the day. Then a prisoner of war's shot, and the dogs attack them. And I think it's sort of implied here and there that the Germans are trying to whittle away the American Jew American Jewish men that are at the camp. So one man is told, "Oh, Solomon, that's a Jewish name," and he's just staring at him, and then they bundle him out when the roll call happens. So they're trying to protect their friends, and I think it's sort of implied that they're trying to whittle away the men they don't like. And then we have a narration by Cross again. He mentions obviously the raids on Berlin. There was 15 forts lost on the raid. Damaged forts land, and the base scrambles to get the injured men out. So there's bloodied turrets, men with really severe wounds, men with horrible burns on their faces. And it's as the show goes through, it still wants to show you the toll taken on the men still. The war is not over. It's only going to get worse. And then Roz mentions that March 6th, 1944 was the Black Monday of the bomb group with 150 men lost. That's no small number. You put that into terms of forts, that's a lot of planes. As the bombing missions on Berlin get bigger and bigger. Then Cross goes to see Sandra to take the edge off. And he says it went from wanting to have someone to talk to, then it turned into a bigger thing, and they're sleeping with each other, sort of having like a semi-casual relationship to sort of take the edge off the war. Then we're back at the Stalag again. Eagan and Buck make their crystal radio. Buck and Eagan have a chat about wanting to be his best man after the war. Eagan mentions about escaping, and we're going to have to pick our moment. And then we're right back at Thorpe Abbotts. So to say it sounds really quick, but this episode really does. I've said it before, Matt will attest that it really switches around. It was doing it last week, but it does it a lot more here. Trying to
There's a
tell two
lot in episode 8 as well.
Yes,
so
of
it
course.
becomes a characteristic of the series, I think.
Trying to tell concurrent stories. And then we have a new colonel, Lieutenant Colonel Bennett's introduced, being in temporary command of the 100th Bomb Group. You might recognize him for playing one of the sergeants in SAS Rogue Heroes. Fun fact, I met him at the premiere for that, and he was telling me that he was in Masters, so it's finally nice to see who he played. He'll hang around for a couple of episodes. I think he's great. His American accent, is as good as anyone's in the show. And he said the target for today is the Berlin ball bearing plant. And one of the men mentions that, and we hit that on Monday. We've already hit that. We're going to hit it again. And people are saying, Cross mentions earlier that they're doing so many missions, the red light never seems to go off because they're doing so many raids. And then we have Rosie and his new crew. He says, "You boys worry about the guns, I'll worry about the plane." Once we're up in the air, there's this massive raid sequence, quite brief, but there's a massive raid sequence on Berlin, and you see this again, just this sea of planes, like the 1,000 plane raid type thing.
Yeah, the scale's pretty good
again,
in that sequence.
The scale's really good, really good. And Cross mentions that the P-51 is one of the best fighter planes of the war. I was going to discuss it with you, Matt, see what you felt about that. I know we're not big plane guys, but I'd argue.
I always think of it in terms of it being the American Spitfire. That's how I think about P-51s.
Wow, rankle some, I guess. Oh,
Probably. I mean, aviation seems to be very contentious. Whenever
hot topics, yeah.
Yeah, whenever I read some of the comments about aviation stuff on Twitter, it's always hot debate around things.
It is, yeah. I guess as we say, this show is very much from the American point of view. So I guess if you're in a fort and you've got 50, 60 P-51 supporting you, and they're finally being able to mix it in with the Messerschmitts,
yeah,
then I guess that's going to be the best fighter plane in the war because they can stick with you. So I completely get it. And I guess
it's that showing the war from their perspective, sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. I've read things with my work about RAF crewmen saying that their support they got was fantastic. So I guess it's all contextualized for where you saw it. But we see the P-51s come in, seen them go for the Messerschmitts. It's all going off. Yet again another really well shot, really big in scale raid sequence. Quite brief though. Rosie gets home. He's had 25 missions. They're all happy. So they're in the mess having a few drinks, and Jack tells Rosie that the tours have been up to 30 or 28. But Rosie was the last one to have 25, so he's going to be able to go home. And then another crewman gets quite upset by this, and he says, "Oh, that's good for you, Rosie, but the rest of us have got to stay here now and do it." And he said,
"It's a very interesting scene."
Yeah, he shouts and he says they all want us to fucking die up there. No one gives a shit. Which is quite telling, that the fatigue's really setting in now. Then we're back to Stag again. Eagan and Bucky listen to the news on their crystal radio again. They're having a little bit of solace from the news. Then Rosie is setting up to go home, and he has a change of heart later on. But then we're straight back to the Stalag again, and we have some of the greatest. And I was unexpected, but I think some of the greatest movie referencing in a TV show that I think I've ever heard. So the escapes mentioned, you see a bunch of Luftwaffe security guards, security troops going out in the evening, and all of the lads in the hut are like, "Oh, what's going on?" Like, that looks serious. Then in the morning, you learn of the Great Escapes happened, um, and I think there was a bit of contentiousness because the American crews were all together, and I think they were mixed a little bit, weren't they?
Well, there's an interesting scene where after the escape, they're brought before the commandant, and well, it's not the commandant; it's the deputy commandant who's taking command. The
Yeah.
commandant's already been ushered away for allowing the escape to happen.
Yes.
And they say that the SS want to take an inventory of Jews, and the American um, ranking officer says there's only Americans at Stalag Luft 3, which is a great line, and I like the line, but
Yes.
obviously it's not entirely true because
No,
it was all Allied air crews were in different segments of the camp.
of course.
So you had Britons, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, Czechs,
Yeah.
South Africans, Commonwealth, French, Greek,
Yeah,
Dutch,
everyone.
Belgians, everyone's in there. Basically Allied air
Mm,
crews.
yeah. But
So
obviously for the show,
for
it
the
makes
for
sense to
that
have them all
impactful
together.
moment where he says that it's we're Americans, we aren't
Yeah.
differentiated by
It's a
creed or
Creed. It's
race.
a good
It's a
line.
it's a
Great
good
line.
line.
It is.
Um, but for me this week, I really liked a couple of sequences. The return sequence from Black Monday that you mentioned
Very good.
is very strong, a really good montage. The raid sequence you mentioned as well, and I also like the the scene where Rosie re-ups and
Yeah.
explains why he can't go home at 25.
Yeah.
That's very good. But as you say, the Great Escape references were on point.
Very good. So we even get a line that the sub commander of the camp now says, because of this great escape. And I like it. Like it's very on the nose, but we've had it earlier with Orlok getting some sort of really commando booky references in. But I like the addressing the movie in a sort of
Mm.
kind of natural way. He hasn't gone, you haven't had a direct reference, but you've referenced it a tiny little bit. I like that. I thought it was nice. I was reading something the other week that Matt shared with me. It was I think it was Screen Rant was surmising whether they were going to actually work in the movie
Yeah, yeah.
at some point. And I was like, well, that would have been incredibly hard to do. Um, you'd have had to recast the original cast, and then you would have had to make space for them to show them. And the way that the series goes from here on in, there's so much going on that I'm like, you'd have had no time. You could have easily done a whole episode of the Stalag. If I'm honest, I wouldn't have minded it either because I think it's quite strong, and I've got it in my quick alley tally section this week. Is I think the mise en scène of the camp is really good. I
Good.
love the huts. I think they look lived in. They look real. And you've got people have torn out pages of books and stuck them on the wall. You got pin-ups everywhere. Little like someone taking a cap like a captured a German helmet and is like storing things in it. It all looks quite lived in. And I really like
Olaf
the
shared some behind the scenes photos, I
yeah, they're
think
really
today,
nice.
that show the room within the hut that Bucky and Buck are in, and mise en scène of it is the set dressing and design is really good.
Really strong. Yeah, really strong. I like it. And I also like the look of Egan and Buck in the camp. I don't know whether it's makeup or they've lost weight, but they do look a little bit drawn
Look
in.
gaunt at times, don't
They
they?
look a
I
bit
like
gaunt.
how it shows them as um, dirty, tired,
Yeah.
It's a very interesting contrast with classic depictions of the
House.
Stalag Lufts
Mm,
and
mm.
stuff.
It's a bit more Rescue Dawn than it is
Yeah.
Great Escape. Not people aren't people don't look like Hollywood stars at this point. They look like
Mhm,
they've been
mhm.
roughing
Everyone
it
looks
for a
well
few
fed in the
weeks.
Great Escape.
Yeah, they do actually. Yeah, they do. But I like the Mackinaw coats. I like the great coats, the scarves and the gloves. I love stuff like that. I like it when shows have got the budget to be able to go, right, it's cold weather, so let's crack out all the cold weather gear. And God knows I love cold weather gear looks on troops. I think it's
Mm.
really nice. There's something about it. Really, really nice this week. And then yeah, just to quickly sum up the end of the episode there, Matt mentioned that Rosie re-ups for more missions and he learns from Bennett that the B-17s are going to be used as bait so the P-51s can knock out German aircraft. And he says that's going to be it. If you come back in, Rosie, that's what you're going to be doing. And Rosie's just like, yeah, cool, okay. He's sort of okay. And I think what we're learning is that Rosie Rosenthal's absolutely hard as nails. Um, I would love to just have a series all around Rosie. And I think it almost becomes his show a little bit at times. And I really like the actor playing Rosie. I think he really gives it his all. Um,
He's very good. No, I
Very,
agree.
very good. Yeah, and my quick final thoughts for this one is again, I think it's a strong episode. I think it's having the series from here on in is having to do so much to get to the end of it and tie up ends and remember narratives that they've set up previously. So there's a lot going on, but it just about makes it work. As opposed to last week where I thought they put too much in. I think this week was nice to have, okay, what's going on in the camp? What's going on at Thorpe Abbotts? And I think they just about managed to get it all there. And I do enjoy a POW movie. So I like those elements of it. Matt, anything else before we get into episode 8?
I agree. I really liked a couple of the scenes. I thought the exploration of the changing of the number of missions that
Yeah.
the chaps had to fly was interesting, and the
Mm,
reaction of that. Um, just another pretty interesting depiction of an element that you don't really think about.
yeah, massively.
I think seeing a bit more of the camp this week was also really interesting. Um, but again, we're struggling with the number of separate storylines that we're interweaving at times, and it becomes a little bit muddled sometimes. And I think that's
Yeah.
more of a critique for the next episode, really.
Yeah. It's the edit more than anything else. I don't think
Yeah.
it's not the weight given to storylines. It's not the writing or the acting. I think it's just the edit.
Oh no, oh no.
Personally.
What I think it is it's literally there's a lot going on within
Mm,
the stories,
yeah.
and we've in the earlier part of the series we've had that time to get to know the context and the characters,
Mm,
and that's all been pre-established so that they can do this back end, which is quite busy.
mm.
Worth noting that these two episodes, 7 and 8, were both directed by Dee Reese.
Ah.
Um, she's a black director from the US. Worked on Space Force, Bessie, a
Oh,
Bessie
okay.
Smith biopic, When We Rise about Stonewall, and most interestingly, Mudbound from a few years ago, which was a very interesting movie about World War II, Black World War II veterans coming home to,
Mm,
I think it's Mississippi, and they have to get used to the fact that everything's still very much
right.
segregated post-war. Um,
Yeah.
so she's directed these two episodes. So like this is kind of like her little block.
You wouldn't be able to tell. Like it's very
No, it
streamlined.
it
It's very
it
good.
fits in perfectly with the rest of the tone of the other
Mm.
episodes that have been directed by other directors for sure. And they're all very competently. It's all very
Oh,
competently directed for sure.
massively. Yeah. Pilot the Bombardier. Did you know you can join the Fighting on Film Patreon for as little as £2.50 per month, which includes a vote in the Patreon pick, exclusive podcast news, guest announcements, and a hell of a whole lot more. Now let's get this baby home.
I'm Captain Dale Dye, and you're listening to Fighting on Film.
So, Matt, episode 8, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so this is the episode where we get introduced to the Tuskegee Airmen, which is exciting. We knew it was
Yeah.
coming. We've been anticipating it for a little while, and we get this really nice opening sequence of a raid in Italy. It's a night raid. They're in, I think it's P40s they're in, and they're doing some strafing runs, and a little bombing run, and it's
It's
CGI
nice
is
to have
quite good.
some fighters
Yeah,
depicted. It's nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And we're introduced to a select number of the airmen from the 99th. We've got Ncuti Gatwa as Lieutenant Robert Daniels. Doesn't get a great many lines in this episode, but he's introduced and he's
But he looks
prominent
great
enough.
in the kit.
Oh,
Looks
they all do. They all
fantastic.
really
Yeah.
good in it. And then we got Brandon Cook, who plays Second Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson, who is the Tuskegee kind of lead character for this episode.
Mm.
We got Jonathan Jules, who plays Lieutenant Westbrook, Josiah Cross, who plays Macon, Francis Lovell, who plays Captain Wendell Oliver Pruitt, and Bradley Banton, who plays Lieutenant Lee Archer. So
Mm.
basically, that's a flight of Tuskegee
Yeah.
airmen. We're introduced to those. Um, we're very much thrown into that, and then it's kind of introduced that, oh, now we're going to do Operation Dragoon, and we're going to fly
Yeah.
P-51s a very long way and raid Toulon.
I mean, is
Um,
this the first Dragoon that I've seen on screen?
might be,
I couldn't recall anything else being Dragoon.
yeah.
It might be one of the
Uh,
few times Dragoon's ever been portrayed.
there's probably
Yeah.
been reference to it. I feel like there is one film
Yeah.
that does
Let us
reference
know,
it.
FOF fans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we've got a little bit more of the camp. We've got Bucky playing his imaginary baseball game in the middle of the camp.
Losing it a
Kind of
bit.
going stare
Stir, cra
crazy at this
stir
point, eight
crazy. Yeah.
months on from
Yeah.
capture. And there's another reference to the Great Escape.
I think it'd drive me nuts not being able to know the scores and stuff. I think that'd drive me
I'm sure it
insane as
would. I mean,
well.
I don't give a shit, but like, I'm sure it would piss you off, no end,
I'd be like,
not
Matt,
knowing whether Luton's winning
have
or
Luton
not.
got in the old
Has
Division
Luton gone
2?
down? Has Luton gone down? I don't
Give,
know.
give it weeks.
Go some Germans
God.
walking past you, going, Rob, Luton, and then just not telling you anything about it.
Everton seem to be doing well, Mr. Maguire. I'm like, what? What? Come back.
Yeah, so there's another little mention of the Great Escape, and Bucky talks about Brits made something happen, and there's a reference to them, being executed
Mm.
and stuff like that. So the captivity is at this point really stretching them. And then we cut to Cross, who is planning the D-Day bombing missions for the 100th. He goes 72 hours without sleep. And there's a nice little sequence that explains how hard it becomes. Like it's the breakfast on the second day, then it really hits you. And then he's going to the doctor to get some pet pills. And he's falling asleep on his feet, hearing things. And I really loved all the mise en scène in the HQ,
Mm.
in the like the planning office and stuff, all the paperwork and the boards and people milling around
A
and
hive
moving
of
stuff.
activity, isn't it? Yeah.
Great, it's really, really good. And then we cut again to, Cross is obviously pining after Sandra, wondering where she is. There's a good little scene where he phones her, I assume, office that she's given him the number for. And the person on the phone refers to her as Captain Westgate rather than Subaltern.
Mm.
That's another little hint that she's not actually ATS.
Yeah, if you haven't tell, you can tell
Yeah,
with all the really obvious. Oh, do you really want to know where I'm going? Like the episode 7, where she's
yeah.
like, "Do you really want to know where I'm going?"
And
And I'm
he's like,
like,
yes, I quite
I
clearly
would
do
quite
want to
like to
know.
know. Yeah, yeah.
Um, she's not very good at cover stories. Like she could give him I'm just off to Northampton to make sure all the
Yeah,
searchlight batteries are all
yeah,
working
yeah,
order. Just something
exactly.
like that,
Yeah. Well, she said she was bad at lying, didn't she? That's probably why.
That's a fucking shit thing to be like bad at when you're a
I
spy,
know. I know.
SOE operative. I'm terrible at lying. Um,
Maybe that's why
but
she
yeah,
was good.
we pick up with Sandra in Paris, and we meet her on a bus, and then she's seen in a different costume sauntering around kind of the suburb, and she walks down an alleyway, and we don't know why she's walking down an alleyway past some Germans. and she goes into like an art dealer's and says, "I've covered the entire building," and then empties a purse onto the table, and it's got like three little, not sure what they are. Do you know what they are? Three little
like,
metal things.
I thought they
Are
were
they
detonators,
microphones?
perhaps.
Detonators,
I
perhaps?
thought they might
Or
be detonators.
yeah. And
Yeah.
she's like, and I'm like, what have you covered the entire building with? Like, what does that mean, Sandra? You have to give us a
I
little bit
don't
more
know.
because we haven't
SOE
seen you
things.
doing this.
No,
We
no.
don't know what you're doing. Like, what are
It's
you
thrown
doing
at
in
us that she's
Paris
SOE.
to prepare us for D-Day? What's going on
Mm,
here? I'll come back to this in a moment, but the use of her character is terrible.
not the
Um,
best.
we get the briefest look at D-Day from the air, which is really cool. So Rosie's
Beautiful shot though,
describing it to
isn't it?
Croz after he's woken
Oh,
up, and you get that really cool shot, sort of quarter
yeah.
shot along the beach, and you see.
The thing is, they tease that at the end of episode 7. If you're watching on Apple TV, they tease that
They do,
shot, and they also tease it in the intro. But that's literally all you get.
yeah.
So I was thinking we'd see some bombing raids over the beaches by the 100th or inland. I thought we'd at least get some of that, but no, you get a lovely little man looking out of his cockpit over what I assume might be
I,
Utah or Omaha. Like
but
it's
again, it's
lovely.
what they see of the war, isn't it? We're very much
Of
getting that. We're
course.
not
And I was
getting
like, just
anything
take me over a
more.
little bit, please.
I
I'd
know.
love to see Normandy from the air. Come on. But they don't.
Um, and then we get a really cool little raid sequence with the Tuskegee Airmen for Toulon.
That's
And
nice.
we see the P-51s coming in on rocket strafing runs,
Hmm.
and they take a lot of flak, and they lose most of the flight,
Mm.
leading to three of them becoming POWs, which was a really interesting sequence because can you imagine the feeling of being a black airman being captured
Yeah.
by Germans?
I-
It must have been that, and being obviously a Jew as well.
Yeah.
Those are the two
Must have
kind
been
of
horrible.
demographics you know must
Mm.
have been terrifying.
Yeah.
Get to see another Luftwaffe intelligence officer trying to pretend he knows everything about America, talking about jazz and
I
Detroit,
love
and
that.
there's lots of really interesting racial intonations of
Mm.
what he's suggesting, and he talks about
It's a very well written piece of dialogue.
there's some interesting questions posed. Do you know any countries that are better? Is the response of, I think it's Macon,
Mm.
um, when the German intelligence officer asks, "Why are you fighting for a country that doesn't think you're,
Yeah.
worthy?" Um, and I love how that response is immediately juxtapositioned with a cut to the three of them entering Stalag Luft 3.
Yeah.
And you've got kind of just peppered in the background. It's not heavily in there, but there's noticeable shouts from white POWs saying that they should be somewhere else,
Yeah.
hinting at, segregation, because
Some
at
good
that point
old
in the
boys
war,
somewhere,
US Army
giving it
segregated.
some. Mm.
It's
Of course.
not the warmest of welcomes, that's for sure.
No.
And then we get a little scene where they arrive in Buck and Bucky's hut,
Yeah.
and two of the airmen. Weird that they spread the airmen around a little bit, but I guess it's
Yeah.
where the bunks were free. Um,
Put them in the
and it's
hut with the main cast in. That's useful.
right, absolutely. Um, and it's a not the warmest of welcomes there either. And
No.
yeah, there's a nice little sequence later on where Bucky um sort of like chats with Alexander, talks about, well, I knew that you guys wouldn't be spies. That's why
Yeah.
I let you stay.
It's quite
Um,
telling. Yeah.
it is. It is. So again, some interesting little sequences there. Then we're straight back to the UK, and there's a nice little prep montage showing um, some of the bits and bobs going on. And then there's a lot of discussion around, again, back at the camp. So we are jumping back and forth a
Yet
lot.
again. Yeah.
And we kind of conclude in the camp, and they're realizing that the Russians have entered Germany, the Allies have landed in France, they've approached Paris.
Isn't this in the bag ration that's going on here?
Yeah,
I
yeah. So
remember. Yeah.
like they're crossing the Vistula and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're pushing
Um,
and yeah.
yeah.
Germany's fucked. Want
Yeah,
a better
quite
word.
clearly by
Yeah.
mid 44, you just go, actually, you know what? No, no, this ain't gonna do it.
No.
So that they're discussing the three possible outcomes of their situation: that they're moved, that they're all executed summarily, or there's a pitched battle.
Yeah.
When either Allied forces reach the camp, or basically the Germans try and execute them en masse, and there's
And they
going to be
fight their way
resistance.
out. Yeah.
There's a cool little montage where they show the chaps working on the stump puller, pulling up tree stumps as
Yeah.
exercise to get ready for, either the march or actually having to fight the guards, making little wooden knives and stuff, and how to use them, and
Yeah.
using a weighted sock as a weapon, little things like that.
Yeah. It's a bit
Really
DIY.
interesting.
I like that. It's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, it's a bit of
Mm.
a A-team montage
Yeah, a
almost.
little bit. Yeah.
Um,
Crack out the mini Rugers, boys.
But yeah, so I mean, for me this week, my favorite scene was definitely the Toulon raid.
Yeah.
The scenes around that as well were really interesting.
Mm.
And in terms of Ali, the little wooden knife, little wooden Bowie knife that one of them's
Nice.
seen carving
Yeah,
is
very
quite funny.
nice. I like it.
And the Tuskegee guys have got some really gorgeous kit. Their
Oh
flight
yeah,
suits and the shoulder holster
it's
1911s,
cool.
and Gotwa looks great
Oh, he looks great in anything, that lad, though, doesn't he?
the bomber jacket he's
Absolutely
wearing and stuff.
fabulous. Yeah, yeah. No, it's great to see the Tuskegee Airmen coming in.
Mm.
I think inferring from what I've seen about Orloff writing them, I think they were meant to be maybe a little bit more involved than they are, because they do come in right at the end.
It does leave you
Um,
wishing,
yeah.
there was more of them, and it is
I mean,
almost like a soft pilot.
it is really.
If it
I
was the
mean,
90s, you could say it was a soft pilot,
yeah, it's a backdoor pilot, definitely.
right?
Yeah, like I just wish. I almost think somewhere at some point, some studio execs come in and gone, right, we're cutting this from perhaps 11 episodes to 9. Or
Mm.
because it feels like you definitely could have got an episode out of the camp itself.
Well, there's
You
so
know,
much.
there's a lot going on here.
There's a lot going on, but there's so much exposition within the Tuskegee
Mm,
dialogue. They're all using their full names. They're all
yeah,
explaining missions to each other, and it's
yeah.
like, if this had had a little bit more room to
A little
breathe,
bit more
this would
breathing
have been more
space.
organic. There's
Just a
a couple
tiny
of
bit.
lines in there where you're like,
Yeah,
over the radio on a mission, why are you using his full name and
yeah.
rank?
Because we
It's
learned a few
weird.
weeks ago that there was stuff. We can't really say what it was, but there was something massively cut. Doesn't affect the narrative, but it was just
No,
something else that would have added on to the show that we assume somewhere. Maybe when we speak to John Orloff in a few weeks' time, um, that things were cut just because of time, and it's a massive studio project. I understand some things are going to be shelved. As a writer, not everything you write makes the final cut anyway. But sometimes with this late stage Masters of the Air, I feel like I don't want to say like I feel like we're rushing over it too much, but sometimes I'm like, just breathe a little bit if you
mm,
could, and I understand if you can't, but I'm just like, oh, I'd love to spend some more time with the Tuskegee guys. I'd love to spend a bit more time with the ground crew on Thorpe Abbotts. I'd love to have seen an episode with them doing their daily
yeah,
routine. But obviously this isn't we're not in the 90s, series don't have 26 episodes anymore. That
no,
streaming's kind
yeah.
of made that a thing, and we don't get those seasons anymore.
I want a bottle episode inside Stalag Luft 3
It would
where
have
they're
been
all in the
good.
hut chatting.
Yeah. Yeah. Like they enforce a curfew on them and they all have to be chatting, in a thing. Yeah, that's what we do. But no, yet again, we've said it for weeks that we're desperately close to the end, and now we've got one episode to
Yeah.
go. And
I think next week we're gonna ask for your one word or one sentence reviews of what you've thought of the show.
the
We'll
entire
read some of
way,
those out.
definitely.
Um, I'm looking forward to finishing the show and seeing what everyone thinks of it in
Yeah.
its totality.
I mean, for my sort of my final thoughts of the series so far, I feel a bit sad, really, in a way, because I wasn't I was obviously I was what 7 when Band of Brothers came out,
Mm,
so like I didn't really get the grandioseness of it. When the Pacific came out, I saw it a year after it broadcast because I didn't have Sky. So I rented it on DVD when it came out. But this time I'm like, I've been part of it. I feel like I've been there the whole way through, and I'm gonna be a bit sad that I don't have like this weekly series to chat about with people. You know, it's a weird one. Like this feels like a monumental thing. Like it feels like this big thing, and we're not going to have it. It's just a bit of a weird feeling. I don't know what you feel about that.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean.
Do join us next week for episode 9 of Masters of the Air when it's all going to come to a head. What's going to happen to Bucky and our 100th Bomb Group pals? Join us again to find out. And don't forget to use the code FOFPodcast at checkout on airfix.com. Got a last couple of weeks to use the link. Get yourself some money off some model kits. And we'd love to see them if you do. So join us again next time for more Masters of the Air. We'll catch you again next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.